All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to break down a really interesting document from July 2025 called America's AI Action Plan. It's basically a full-blown strategy for the U.S. to achieve global dominance in artificial intelligence, and, it sets the stakes incredibly high right from the very first page.
I mean, right out of the gate, the preface sets this incredibly high-stakes tone. This quote, it frames the entire strategy not just as some economic goal, but as a core matter of national security. The key words are right there: unquestioned and unchallenged. That's not a small goal.
And the introduction makes this even more explicit. It flat out says the U.S. is in a race for global AI dominance, and it even compares it directly to the space race. The argument in the document is pretty simple. Whoever builds the biggest, baddest AI ecosystem is going to set the standards for the whole world and reap these massive economic and military rewards. The message is clear. This is a race America has to win.
So, how are they going to win this race? Well, the plan is built on three main pillars. The first one is all about hitting the gas on AI innovation, with a real focus on unleashing the private sector to create a development boom.
So how's that going to work? The plan lays out 5 clear objectives. First, cut the red tape. Second, champion open source models. Third, get the American workforce ready. Fourth, boost manufacturing. And fifth, pump money into AI-driven science. It's a pretty clear signal that the strategy here is to enable, not control.
And to really illustrate this philosophy, the plan points to something that happened on day one. They rescinded a previous executive order on AI. The logic is straightforward. They're saying the old approach was heading towards heavy regulation, and this plan argues that AI is way too important to be, and this is a direct quote, smothered in bureaucracy.
The plan also puts a special emphasis on open source AI. So, what does that mean? Basically, these are models that anyone can get their hands on, study, and build on top of. The document argues this is strategically vital. Why? Because it lets startups innovate without having to rely on just a few giant companies, and it helps researchers run more rigorous experiments.
Okay, so what about the workforce in all this? The plan outlines what it calls a worker-first AI agenda, and it has 3 clear priorities. 1. Steer federal money toward AI skill development. 2. Let employers reimburse for AI training tax-free. And 3. Fund rapid retraining programs for anyone who might be displaced by these new technologies. This brings us to the second pillar, building American AI infrastructure. Here, the whole focus shifts from the digital world to the physical one. We're talking about constructing the massive foundation of hardware, data centers, and energy that you absolutely need for a dominant AI ecosystem.
And if you really want to understand the philosophy behind this pillar, you don't have to look much further than this direct quote from the plan itself. It's a totally unambiguous call for a massive, and I mean massive, rapid build-out of all the physical stuff needed to power AI.
Now, a huge part of that infrastructure is energy. AI data centers are incredibly power-hungry. So the plan lays out a 3-step strategy for the grid. First, stabilize what we've got now to make sure the power stays on. Second, optimize the resources we already have. And third, aggressively grow the grid for the future by embracing new sources of energy.
Okay, so how do you build all this stuff quickly? Well, the plan proposes streamlining the whole permitting process. This includes new exemptions under NEPA, that's the National Environmental Policy Act, and also expanding something called the Fast 41 process to cover data centers, which basically just speeds up approvals. They even talk about using federal lands for construction.
And of course, you can't have AI without the chips. The plan supports continuing the CHIPS program to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., but there's a twist. It calls for a renewed focus on the return on investment for taxpayers and stripping away what it calls extraneous policy requirements. So, a much more business-focused approach.
All right, so you've got innovation speeding up and infrastructure getting built. The plan then moves to its third and final pillar, leading in international AI diplomacy and security. This is where the strategy goes global, focusing on foreign policy and, critically, protecting American technology.
The diplomatic game plan here is kind of 3-pronged. For our allies, the goal is to export the entire American AI stack: hardware, models, software, the whole shebang. When it comes to China, the stated goal is to counter its influence in global groups. And within those international bodies, the strategy is to push for rules that reflect American values.
A key part of the security strategy is all about containment.
The plan wants to stop adversaries from getting their hands on advanced U.S. tech. How? By strengthening export controls on AI chips, closing manufacturing loopholes, and, this is crucial, getting allies on the same page with these protections to form a unified front.
The plan is also looking ahead to the potential dangers of the most powerful AI systems out there. It actually mandates that the government evaluate these frontier models for national security risks. It specifically calls out threats from things like super advanced cyber attacks or the development of CBRNE weapons. That's chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive threats.
So what does this all add up to? Well, the conclusion of the plan frames this whole thing not just as a policy initiative, but as America's chance to grab the opportunity of a truly historic technological revolution.
And this final quote from the document's introduction really just captures the massive scale of the vision. It describes AI's potential as 3 huge historical transformations all happening at the same time. I mean, that is an incredibly ambitious way to frame it, and it really underlines the entire plan.
And that kind of leaves us with this final question, doesn't it? The entire document is built around this idea of winning a technological race. So it really makes you think, what does that actually take? And what are the full implications if you actually succeed? Definitely a lot to chew on.